Ever paid a bill late because you misplaced it? We'll spend all day organizing our closets, but when it comes to money, forget it. Stop the madness. Let's get it together financially. Organizing your money is easy when you have the tools to do it. Plus, you'll reduce frustration and give yourself the assurance that you're prepared for whatever life throws your way. Visit stcumoney.org to get 8 free tips on how to organize your money before you think about tackling those closets.
Spokane listens when business talks. Welcome to Business Talks, the region's only local business talk show with your host, Ryan McNeese. Business Talks is brought to you by our friends at STCU and Well Dressed Walrus. Now, let's get down to business with Business Talks.
Welcome to Business Talks. I'm Ryan McNeese, and we're here in the studio with Larry Myers. And this is going to be an interesting segment. If anybody's seen the movie We Bought a Zoo, I would relate it to this to a certain extent, and in a good way. Larry, you've been in the mortgage banking business for a long, long time.
Over 20 plus years, yeah.
And then decided, I'm going to buy a hardware store. And thank you for being here. This is an interesting story.
Well, thank you. I threatened many times when the banking industry was frustrating that I was going to buy a 7-Eleven because it would be much funner to serve Slurpees than it would be in the banking industry sometimes. But I truly enjoy hardware. I get everything that I was getting in the industry of helping customers.
So I think what you're saying there is the core of mortgage banking and other financial services or professional services, the reaching out and resolving problems and helping people was at the core of what you liked.
Right.
But maybe after nearly 20 years, you were looking for other outlets.
Yeah, the extra paper pushing, the crossing the T's, making sure that everything was super compliant and the working on getting the loan through spent more of my time than the actual helping of the customer and working through their overall problems. So the hardware store is kind of it's like every boy's dream, owning a toy store.
Yeah, endless toys, every row, every aisle.
Exactly, yeah. My problem is trying not to be the best customer that the store has.
It cuts into the profit margins a bit.
Right, yeah. So, it's just really helping customers. I was trying to do ordering this morning. I think I got through 3 aisles maybe, and through that I probably helped 20 customers.
Right, you start in on doing inventory, but all of a sudden a new challenge or new
someone comes up, has a question, ask them if you can help them.
Which is the part you enjoy.
Exactly.
So how did you get into the mortgage business to begin with?
Well, graduating from Eastern, I knew I wanted to do sales. I started with, can I do companies?
Absolutely.
I started with Northwestern Mutual Life. They have a college agent program, and started as a junior in college, selling financial products. Got my securities license by the time I graduated from college.
I already got your.
Is that
the
my Series 6 and 63.
Hmm.
Had my insurance license my junior year in college, and I sold insurance and financial products probably for 12 years.
Okay. Through Northwestern Mutual. Okay.
Yeah, and my wife and I had competing careers as we got married at 28 and started having children.
Mm-hmm.
She was a store manager for Mervyn's, which is no longer.
Right.
And we got relocated to Bellingham, and we're working, and I was trying to balance. And as she got more and more busy, I kind of pulled away and started taking care of kids a little bit. I actually ran a daycare for a year.
That's an interesting piece of the story.
And that was a lot of fun.
And offered you more time with the kids. That's
right.
Great.
Yeah, so I pulled away. I looked at our budgets and said, gosh, we're spending $1,100 in daycare, and I'm spending another $1,000 in office expense. And so I just kind of pulled away, ran it out of my house for a while, and ran a daycare to offset some of the extra costs.
Makes sense.
Did that for a year, and then we decided it was best for our family to move back to Spokane. When we did that, my wife and I did role reversals again.
Okay, you went back out into the workforce.
Yeah, and that's when I got into banking. I decided, I'm going to do a full change since we're relocating, moving. I'd have to reinvent myself again anyway in the insurance industry a little bit. So I decided to go into banking, thinking it was more secure. And so
shouldn't have laughed, but I think I know the time period you're talking about.
Right. Well, so this was in 2002.
Yeah.
So that 2001, and it was
that was a good time.
Yeah, it was rocking and rolling. Got into banking and right around in 1998. Actually, got into banking and progressed through, and it was doing well, and I did well, and lasted through all the way through. The tough times of 2008. Did some of my own investing. Had a big development up on the South Hill.
Okay.
Which, in 2008,
right.
when you have over 5 acres of commercial development hanging from you, you start getting a little nervous. So we tightened up and
it's a real stress.
Rented our house, and that's when I was really thinking. And so, and this just happened.
How did this opportunity come about? I think you've done a good job of explaining kind of the trajectory of the stresses, the good and the stressful challenges of the mortgage banking real estate industry. But how does one decide, you know what, I'm stressed out, I think I'm going to buy a hardware store? Because that isn't necessarily step one, step two. That's why hopefully you're okay with it, but I bought a zoo, or we bought a zoo. I love that movie because it's it's almost kind of everybody's, I don't know, daydream in the sense that, you know what would I do if I'm not doing what I'm doing? And in your case, of course, I'd buy a hardware store. So tell us how that came about.
Well, the previous owner, Brian, was a client of mine. I had done the Ridge condominium product condos in the Browns area.
Browns Edition.
Yeah, I financed most of those, and he had bought a couple there. He has also one of the old mansions on Riverside.
Beautiful. Those are cool.
And so I kind of got to know him, and I saw that, and the hardware store I patronized since it's been there 30 years on the corner of Driscoll and Garland.
You were a customer then, and you're still a customer, right?
Right. Yeah. So my very first home was on Audubon Park there, and so we were constantly over there getting
that's a great area.
And fixing something. All those old houses constantly need fixing. They say if you aren't rebuilding your home every 10 years, you need to be.
That's an interesting line.
So I happened to just see some changes. He had originally, I knew his assistant manager, and his assistant manager had hopes of buying it and was in a contract on that. And I showed up one day, and his manager wasn't there that was buying it. Potentially buying it, and a few of the other people weren't there, and so I reached out to Brian and said, "Hey, look like some changes have gone on. If you consider looking at reselling it, give me a call.
Here's my card. You'll know where to find me."
Right, and he already had my number, and so about almost 4 years passed.
Oh, really? That long went by?
Yeah, 3.5 years went by.
So what was the year you originally reached out, though, and said, hey, call me if you're going to sell this? What year was that?
That was probably like 2012, 13.
Okay, 2012, 13.
Yeah.
Would you have pulled the trigger at that point if he'd literally said, 2012, it's yours?
Yeah, I actually had more money then.
Maybe the opportunity would have been better timing?
Yeah. I hadn't built the house yet, and I had just sold a development that I had, and it was actually probably a better time, and I probably would have pulled the trigger. And there was a lot more frustrations in the banking industry in terms because the things were just starting to really change,
right?
And there were big changes. All the Dodd-Frank stuff and
significant transactional paperwork.
Yeah, so I just let that sit, and October of 2016, he shot me a text and said, "Hey, were you serious?" I'm going,
Yep, I was 4 years ago. Let me chat with my wife, see if I'm
right.
still serious.
Right. Yeah, and then and I went to my wife, and she knew my frustrations, and she said, "Well, we can look into it."
Yeah.
So multitude of talks, and of course, you don't know how much.
Right.
And so went through talks, got it kind of written down, took it to attorney, had it written up, and agreed on, and then back and forth on how the attorney wrote it up, and us making some tweaks. And March 1st we closed. And
March 1st. So this is definitely fresh. This is definitely new. Let's take a short break and come right back at that spot and chat more about being in the hardware business.
Great.
Thank you, Larry.
You're listening to SpokaneTalksOnline.com, Spokane and North Idaho's business and community talk station.
Did you know that 1 out of every 3 jobs in Washington state is trade-related? From aerospace to apples, we're home to some of the world's top exports, and our ports, waterways, and rails are vital to providing good family wage jobs and creating a strong economy in every corner of our state. To remain a global trade leader, we need to keep attracting private investments that enhance our infrastructure. To that, it supports our ports and trade activities. We also need to foster a regulatory environment that provides certainty for investors looking to grow here. Keep Washington Competitive, a coalition of business, labor, agriculture, and trade groups, believes that consistent, reliable regulatory timelines are one of the best ways to grow our economy and keep jobs here at home. Keep Washington Competitive encourages lawmakers and agency regulators to work with business and labor leaders on policies that provide certainty for investors. To learn more, visit keepwashingtoncompetitive.com.
If you're like many shoppers, you love to find a deal online. Or you shop online because it's so convenient. And you probably know thieves love to go online too, to try to steal shoppers' credit card information. When you're shopping online, you can start protecting your credit card information by investigating the website you're shopping on. Make sure the online retailer lists a real phone number and a physical address. Read the site's privacy policy and search for reviews and ratings of the retailer. You can read more about safe shopping online at STCU's financial education blog. Go to stcumoney.org.
Welcome back to Business Talks. I'm Ryan McNeese, and I'm here with Larry Myers, and we're having an interesting conversation. I was so excited to get Larry to come into the studio. Busy guy, been in the mortgage banking business for a long, long time, and decided that going to buy a hardware store. However, there's even more to the story, because if you go back, Larry, you were mentioning that about 3 or 4 years ago in your own community, you'd identified that I believe the post office was closing. Tell us about that story that then, of course, led to then going to buy a hardware store.
Yeah, so 2014, our post office in Tumtum, Washington, was a contract post office, meaning that
so privately owned, but with a contract.
They call it a CPO, and a lady in her, I think she was approaching early 70s, had run it for 12 years, and she was wanting to retire, and there was nobody that was willing to pick it up. And so I decided, I'll pick it up, and I'll hire a couple people, see if I can put an espresso stand in it, and make a few extra dollars to pay for the employees, and
diversify your revenue a little bit.
Right. And so I ran that, which I think prepared me for the employees, and because I really didn't have employees, and just jumping to a hardware store where you immediately, I have 12 full-time employees, and I'm 20 during harvest time, which is basically starts in March and goes to August. So that prepared me for that. What didn't prepare me for it is as minimum wage goes up, and you're on a set contract at
those are
X
real
dollars,
issues.
and now your numbers don't work anymore.
You
And
can't change the top number; you just change the bottom number.
Exactly.
That doesn't work.
So
Right.
we went to the post office, and we had gone 2 years. You go 2 years, you can rebid it. We went out 2 years, rebid it, and asked for more, and gave them specific why, the minimum wage and other things. And they said, nope, take it as you originally bid it, or release.
Yeah,
And so
interesting.
we, unfortunately, 2 weeks ago, just had
Just
to,
2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
had to close the post office.
Okay, and has that building become something different, or is it just going to be closed for
Well,
now?
it used to be just it's the only post office I know that sits right on the water. So it has
Pretty good real estate.
Yeah, it has value. It has a nice dock. It
Sure.
has a nice deck. It has a beautiful view.
Might be a highest and best use issue where you mentioned barista stand. That doesn't sound bad right there.
Right, or he would make just as much money or more just being an Airbnb by fixing it up a little bit. But it's sad to see it go. It's been there, as long as I know. In the Tum Tum area, there used to be in the old resort. There used to be the post office there, and then as the resort was changing, then it was moved, and it's been where it's at for 15 years.
Well, funny how these things happen, but I think it's interesting in your story to identify that stepping stone really probably did have a purpose on a microcosm, giving you some perspective and training and experience to then when you did negotiate and ultimately buy the hardware store. And I don't think we've mentioned, though, is technically the River Ridge Hardware Store. I want to get that out to our listeners, and it's in Garland. So what's the actual address of the store?
2803 West Garland. It's on the corner of Garland and Driscoll, right next to Finch Elementary School.
And it's been there for roughly 30 years?
It's been there 30 years. Prior to that, it was in the River Ridge
Okay.
shopping mall, which is right across from the VA hospital.
Okay.
So when I was a kid growing up in the Audubon area, it was a grocery store, a little neighborhood grocery store.
Okay.
So at River Ridge, we actually have a lot of those little things, the candies for the kids, the ice cream bars, the pops, and I think we're the only hardware store in the country. There may be one other that has a full picture framing shop.
No kidding.
So we've done picture framing for Northern Quest, for multitude of the bigger businesses. They seek us out because we've had a name of the framing. That's called Frame It Today.
Well, and we identified and chat about this before the show. I think it really resonates with me that in your hardware store, you really made a point to do the value added in the sense that what you're interested in is how can I help whomever comes in? Is that something within our wheelhouse to do, whether it's the framing that somebody might not think is necessarily going to be in the hardware store? Well, you can do it. Here you go. Or as you're identifying, doing your inventory. 20 people come in and you try to help them resolve their issue. When you came in that first day one, when the keys essentially were turned over to you, what was that experience? What did you think?
Well, I kind of knew what I was getting into because of shopping there so much, but it was more of a release of, they're used to an owner that wasn't really existent, and so now I'm a working owner.
Yeah, they're seeing you when they walk in. I actually think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, and I have a manager that kind of handles the day-to-day employee issues and things like that. But I'm there on the floor. They can ask me questions, and where previously to that, the owner was there, but he was in and out.
A little more arm's length.
Yeah, he would be there maybe for a couple hours, and greeting a few customers in on the afternoons here and there. Where I'm there
full time.
Full time.
I would wager that loyalty factor, if you will, that when someone walks in, they know they're going to see Larry, and if I have a question, Larry's going to be there. I'll ask Larry. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, or if I can't answer it, I got employees that have had either, 30 years of hardware experience themselves. The employee that runs our day-to-day maintenance on our rental has been there 20-some years.
And you're buying that experience when you come
Exactly.
in. I have no reason to be critical of the big box stores, but rather complimentary of what you're doing. There are other folks in the Spokane Valley. Peter's Hardware has had that type of mentality where when you walk into your store, you know that somebody is going to be there that can answer your question versus kind of getting stuck in a long aisle that, hey, is there anybody around here? So I think there's a big difference to that.
Well, not only that, we're greeting them at the door, and we're asking them right there, almost to a point of annoyance, of can we help you?
Right.
And it's amazing. A lot of them will say no, but then
They ultimately ask the question.
I go
Yeah.
by the aisle they're in, and then they do. They need something.
Yeah, because if that was me, I'd ultimately get back in the aisle and figure out, I need more help than I thought.
Right. Because we have 20 of the one thing that you're looking for.
Yep.
And you're
Yeah.
trying to figure out which
Which size fits, et cetera.
Right.
What would you say in the early stages of taking on this business? What are some of the challenges that you're seeing that not necessarily the end of the world, but rather, okay, that's going to be maybe a little different than I thought, or we're going to really have to work on that aspect of the business?
It's just keeping it. I didn't really realize how dependent it is on the sun.
As to what people are buying or getting
Or-
out at all.
Yeah.
Huh.
Where our days will just overall increase when it's a sunny day versus if it's pouring down rain, our overall volume will almost, go down by half.
Well, and you almost couldn't have asked for a longer,
Right.
rainy, snowy season than the one you bought into. So,
Exactly. So it's a good test. It's
Yeah,
good.
yeah. You can only hope that next year, just almost statistically, couldn't be that long. So,
Right.
So that'll probably be on the up and up. But how, in terms of your, is your wife involved in the day-to-day or operations of this business?
No, she's not. She's more in just supporting me and helping me with things, which unfortunately I can be kind of needy. So
I think my wife would probably say the same thing about me, but I'll tell you what, in all seriousness, that's a big role to play in any entrepreneur, any business owner, is having the support of your spouse.
yeah, so she's huge in terms of the back end things, helping me with this, and we're going to be flying to Indiana here in 2 weeks for Do It Best. Has two big shows, one in May and then one in October. October you're buying for the spring, May you're buying for the winter. So this store has not done big Christmas stuff, and so we're kind of trying to look at putting the lights out on the store per se.
Right, and tackling that market potentially.
Right. So we're going to the May market and trying to see what kind of things we can get.
That'd be
Get stuff
interesting.
that the big box stores maybe aren't carrying. And
what is that association? You said Do It Best, and I have seen that on the signage. How does that relationship work with your private store with that brand?
sure, Do It Best is actually an owner-owned company.
Okay.
So it's huge buying power. They virtually have zero debt. And as you buy in as a new owner, you're buying a percentage of stock. And then over time, I buy more stock over a basically 5-year period where I'm 100%
Okay.
invested.
That's interesting. I'm glad I asked that because you see that with different hardware stores that there's a national brand sometimes associated with some of the signage, and I wondered how that relationship worked.
Yeah, some of them are franchises.
Right.
And we're actually owner.
Almost like an ESOP
Or
owner,
co-op, yeah.
owner owned, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, are you feeling pretty positive? You're just getting into this business, substantial change. Do you miss the banking industry?
No, not at all. I mean, everything.
Do you want to think about that a little longer?
Yeah.
You seemed awfully positive about that.
Just everything that I was getting from the banking industry, which was helping customers, working with real estate agents, building relationships. It's really all there at the hardware store. I have customers.
Absolutely.
It's like a homecoming for me too. With going to Shadle, I graduated from Shadle Park, and that is Shadle Park's neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's weird of how
like
everybody
that.
moves back into the neighborhoods
Yep.
that they kind of grew up in.
And we're starting to see more and more of that. I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm just perceiving it, but I'm starting to see in the Spokane Valley a lot of those neighborhood restaurants and like you at the hardware store. I think people are wanting more and more of that. We're getting back to it.
Yeah, and so inevitably I'll see somebody today and I said, "Did you go to Shadle?" And,
Yep.
and find out that they were within a year or two of when I graduated. And
Well, you're building loyalty one customer at a time. Tell us, as we sign off here, though, how can folks best find you? Clearly, they can come walk in the store. Is there a website?
we do have a website, and I'm actually polishing that. That's
Working on it.
riverridgehardware.com.
riverridgehardware.com.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Or come in the store at the 2803 West Garland on the corner of Garland and Driscoll.
Perfect. I appreciate you being here, Larry, and you got to come back maybe 6 months, what have you, and tell us about how this process is going. A fascinating story. Appreciate you being here.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Business Talks is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Ask a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com. Business Talks is brought to you by our friends at STCU and Well Dressed Walrus. Business Talks wishes you good business and a good day.
To help you be safe, Washington state law requires you to call 811 2 full business days before you plan, for example, to dig, drill, plow, pull from, or pound anything into the ground. Be prepared to provide the operator with the correct address, cross street, and the description of your work. You must mark the dig area with white paint. The operator will inform you of the utilities notified of your impending excavation. Wait for all their marks. Be safe and dig with care.